The HOA president thought she was above the law when she parked her brand new $100,000 SUV on my private lawn. I warned her 3 times that the ground wasn't stable, but she just laughed and called me a nobody. Little did she know, my 1920s property had a 10 ft deep secret buried exactly where she was standing. 10 minutes later, the ground opened up and the president was left screaming as her luxury car sank into a century of filth. You won't believe how the law ended up making her pay me for the damage.
Your fence is
The morning
clearly in
sun
violation of
barely
Section
touched the
4,
dew on
subsection
Alex's
B. It
lawn
needs
when
to
the
be
peace
removed
of
by
the
Friday.
neighborhood was
Ma'am, I
shattered by the
understand
roar
your
of a
concern, but I have the
high-performance
approved
engine.
permit right here.
Linda, the notoriously entitled HOA president, didn't just drive. She patrolled the streets like she owned every square inch of the asphalt. Today, she wasn't just patrolling. She was making a statement. With a sharp turn and a smug look on her face, she steered her brand new $100,000 luxury SUV directly off the road and onto the lush green grass of Alex's private property. Alex, who was finishing his morning coffee on the porch, couldn't believe his eyes. He had spent years maintaining that specific patch of land, but Linda saw it as nothing more than a convenient VIP parking spot for her upcoming neighborhood, elite brunch. He stepped down from the porch, his voice calm but firm. Linda, you're on my private lawn.
And then he
There's
just
a
walked
perfectly
away.
good driveway 10 feet away.
All right, everyone.
Please move the car before you damage the turf. Linda didn't even look at him as she adjusted her designer sunglasses. She stepped out of the vehicle, the heavy door closing with a thud that echoed through the quiet street. Listen here, Alex, she snapped, her voice dripping with condescension. As the president of this HOA, I ensure this community looks perfect. My driveway is being resealed and I won't have my tires getting dusty on the street. Your little grass patch is the only suitable spot for a vehicle of this caliber. Alex felt a surge of anger, but he knew Linda thrived on drama. He gave her one last serious warning. Linda, I am telling you for the last time that ground is not as stable as it looks. You are
Look, I
trespassing
didn't mean for
and
it
you
to
are
happen.
putting
It was
that
an
expensive
accident, I
car at
swear.
serious risk. Linda let out a sharp, mocking laugh that could be heard 3 houses away. Stable risk, please. You're just a bitter man who can't handle a woman in power.
Absolutely not.
I'll park where I want
I am
when I
not
want.
towing anything near that
If you
pit in this
touch my
fog.
car,
It's
I'll have
too
you fined
dangerous.
into bankruptcy before sunset. With a final beep of her key fob, she marched toward her house, leaving her massive SUV sitting directly over the one thing Alex knew would be her downfall, the
This photograph,
century-old
Exhibit
forgotten
A,
septic tank.
clearly shows the
As the
defendant's
door to
vehicle at
Linda's
the
house
scene of the
slammed
crime
shut, a heavy
exactly when the
silence
victim
fell
was
over the
attacked.
yard, broken
can't
only
just
by the
approve this
ticking of the
budget
cooling
override.
luxury
We
engine.
followed the protocol.
Alex
This
stood
is
on his
exactly
porch,
why we need new
watching a
leadership.
massive
We
SUV
can't keep
sink just a
operating like
fraction
this.
of an inch
How's
into
the
the
level
soft
looking
turf.
over here?
We are perfectly
people
on
in the
grade,
neighborhood
boss.
saw a
Ready
beautiful
for the
lawn.
next step.
But Alex knew the history of this land better than anyone. Beneath that specific patch of grass lay a relic from 1924. A massive concrete septic tank that had been decommissioned decades ago. It wasn't just old, it was hollow, and the concrete lid had been slowly eroding under the damp soil for nearly a century. Alex had planned to have it professionally filled next month, but Linda's ego had decided to move up the timeline. A standard car might have sat there for days without an issue, but Linda's caliber, a vehicle, was a 3-ton-on beast of steel and glass. Every minute that passed, the sheer weight of the SUV was pressing down on the brittle, rusted rebar, and the thinning concrete shell buried just 2 feet below the surface. Inside her house, Linda was likely bragging to her guests about how she had put Alex in his place. Unaware that gravity was about to do the same to her. Alex pulled out his phone and started recording. He wasn't doing it for fun. He was doing it for the inevitable legal battle. He captured the clear property line markers and the signs that explicitly stated private property. No parking. Then he heard it. A low rhythmic creak coming from the earth. It was the sound of 100 years of structural integrity finally giving up. A small hairline fracture formed in the soil near the rear tire and a puff of dust escaped from the ground. The SUV shifted slightly to the left, its alarm chirping once as if it were calling for help. Alex took a step back, knowing that the stable ground Linda had mocked was seconds away from becoming a 10-feet-deep pit of history and filth. The president's pride was about to take a very literal, very expensive plunge. The air was thick with the smell of expensive perfume and grilled appetizers drifting from Linda's house. But on Alex's lawn, the only smell was the damp metallic scent of disturbed earth. Alex kept his camera rolling, his hands steady, even as the ground began to groan like a dying beast. Then, without warning, the stable ground Linda had boasted about didn't just crack, it vanished. A deafening crack like a gunshot echoed through the street as the century-old concrete lid finally shattered under the relentless three-tone pressure. The rear of the SUV didn't just sink, it plummeted in a terrifying display of gravity and irony. The back half of the $100,000 vehicle disappeared into the earth, leaving the front wheels spinning uselessly in the air like a flipped turtle. Then came the smell, a sickening, overwhelming stench of 100 years of stagnant filth and rotted history that had been sealed away since the 1920s. The elite brunch next door came to a screeching halt as the odor hit the guests like a physical wall. Linda burst through her front door, her face turning from a smug grin to a mask of pure horror as she saw her prized possessions sticking out of the ground at a 45-degree angle. "My car! Alex, what did you do to my SAR?" She shrieked, sprinting across the lawn in her designer heels, only to stop short as she realized her luxury parking spot was now a bubbling pit of sewage and debris. Alex didn't lower his phone. "I told you, Linda. I told you 3 times. The ground wasn't stable. You're trespassing on private property, and now you've literally driven yourself into a hole." Linda was hysterical, her voice reaching a pitch that set off neighbors' dogs. "You trapped me. This is assault. This is property damage. I'm calling the police, the fire department, and the HOA board. You're going to jail for this." As she frantically dialed 911, the SUV gave one final gut-wrenching lurch, sinking another foot deeper into the slime. The frame twisted with the sound of screeching metal, and the sunroof shattered under the pressure. Linda watched in stunned silence as the interior of her leather-clad dream began to fill with the very filth Alex had tried to warn her about. The president's authority was gone. All that was left was a very expensive wreck in a very smelly hole. The flashing blue and red lights of 3 police cruisers illuminated the neighborhood, casting a rhythmic glow over the disaster site on Alex's lawn. Linda was already at the lead officer's window before he could even put the car in park. She was hysterical, her designer heels caked in mud, screaming about malicious traps and criminal property damage. "Officer, arrest this man. He intentionally sabotaged his yard to destroy my vehicle. This is a $100,000 loss," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Alex, who was calmly leaning against his porch railing with his phone still in hand. The lead officer, a veteran who had dealt with Linda's HOA complaints before, looked at the SUV, now buried up to its windows in a pit of sewage, and then at Alex. "Sir, did you dig this hole to trap this vehicle?" the officer asked. Alex didn't say a word. He simply handed over his phone and played the video from part 1. The officer watched as Linda ignored 3 separate warnings. He heard her mock, "Alex, call him broke and state clearly on camera. I'll park where I want, when I want." The officer's face hardened. He turned back to Linda. "Ma'am, you were warned that the ground was unstable. You were told you were trespassing on private property. This isn't a trap. It's a century-old septic tank that you decided to use as a parking lot against the owner's explicit orders." But the nightmare was just beginning for the HOA president. When the tow truck arrived, the driver took one look at the situation and refused to hook up the vehicle. "It's a biohazard and a structural risk," he said. "If I pull that out, I might collapse the rest of the yard. You need a specialized crane team, and that's going to cost $5,000 just for the call out." The final nail in the coffin came the next morning when Linda's insurance adjuster arrived. Because Alex had provided the police with the video evidence of her being warned and her willful trespassing, the insurance company denied her claim entirely under the illegal acts and gross negligence clause. She was on the hook for every penny of the $100,000 SUV. Alex didn't stop there. A week later, Linda was served with a massive lawsuit. Alex's lawyer pointed out that her unauthorized weight had destroyed a historical septic system and caused environmental contamination on his land. the court ordered Linda to pay $25,000 for specialized soil remediation and the installation of a new modern drainage system for Alex. The HOA board, embarrassed by the national attention the sunk president video received on social media, held an emergency meeting. They stripped Linda of her presidency and banned her from holding any office in the future. Today, Alex has a brand new reinforced driveway and a beautiful garden. All paid for by the woman who thought she was above the law. Linda, on the other hand, is seen driving an old beat-up sedan. And she never ever parks on the grass.